Good afternoon. This is Mark. I'm with Gov Directions, and we're here today at Gov School. We're going to talk about requests for proposals, and I'm going to go back and forth with a PowerPoint presentation and live screen documents within our individual website to kind of show you some real live requests for proposals. But I'd like to start off by with the PowerPoint to kind of highlight some particular questions that we might have. And I'll go ahead and let's see, also turn over on the video here so you guys can see me this afternoon. It's a great sunny afternoon in Atlanta. Gov Directions is a firm located in Atlanta, Georgia. We serve just over 100,000 companies worldwide, and Gov School is a service of our operation. And we think if we help educate, we'll make you just a little bit better, so you'll have the capability of winning contracts easier in the future. And as a reminder, our recorded sessions are then broadcast. So we do encourage you to maintain your privacy during this session. If you have a question at any given time, just raise your hand and I'll stop. This is a live session, of course, and I'm here to try to answer questions. You can also type those in the chat box, and I'll start that chat box now online here, and I'll refer back to that as we go along. If you have any particular questions or any you can type them in the chat box, but if you want to tell me a little bit about your company, it also will help me, and I'll kind of guide some of my comments and my review of documents as we go forward. And the chat box should pop up now, okay? The request for a proposal, I like to start off when I talk about RFPs to kind of highlight the different types of instruments that governments use to purchase into supplies and goods and services in the marketplace. The most common that we hear of is the invitation to bid. The invitation to bid is a document that is typically when a government knows exactly what they want, and they go out, they issue the bid specifications, all the documents are necessary in order to make a very quick decision. And when they're going through those, they actually will typically base that on lowest price or some other types of some clear indicator how they're going to make that decision, and almost strike those transactions immediately upon receipt of information. The request for information, RFI, that are also sometimes requests for qualifications, the RFQs, those are typically built where they're asking you to tell a little bit about your company, a little bit about your credentials, and they're learning more about you, but they may not have an exact project ready to go, but more, and they're getting in preparation for that. Sometimes they'll pull you in on those projects, maybe using agile procurement and other types of methods to actually help you in the process of making sure that they know what they're going to acquire. And a lot of times they think they know, but they're not quite sure about all the maybe the terminology and so forth that you're aware of in your marketplace, and you're an expert in that, so they lean on you. And then of course we have the request for a proposal. Here is sort of a hybrid of those two there, where basically the government knows what they're trying to achieve, the objective. They generally know how they're going to go about achieving that objective, but then they also want you to propose methods for them to meet their goals. And the first step is often making sure that you have the credentials and you have the capability and you have the understanding of what they're looking for. And then they'll invite you in to make a final pitch of your product, generally narrowing you down to 2 or 3 companies who are in direct competition with each other. And then you go into a negotiation stage, more the traditional RFP. And then you have, of course, you have other types of quick quotes and quick ways to respond. Most of those, once again, where they know exactly what they want, the specifications are there, and then they're going out there to see what the price is in the marketplace. In an RFP, in this particular session today, what we're going to talk about is the structure of the RFP, and we're going to walk through each section and explain the importance of those sections within a document. And then I'm going to refer to an actual RFP as an example to kind of show you those particular items that they're really looking for. And as I just mentioned, the request for proposal is clearly defined as a solicitation that's made through a bidding process by an agency or company interested in procurement of a commercial service or value or asset to potential suppliers to submit business proposals. And so they are leaning heavily on what your methods of achieving their objectives are. The traditional typical parts of a request for proposal include the actual statement of work, the technical specifications that they're looking for, a schedule of time, and the list of the deliverables and as a part of that schedule when they're expecting you to provide those services or supplies. Contract terms and conditions. Oftentimes, the actual contract is listed within an RFP, and they expect you to be able to comply with that. A lot of times, as a company, we may have our own legal restrictions that we want to place around us or collars. Just remember that if a government does provide a contract term in there, they're typically written in stone at that point. It's hard to make any changes, so make sure you can agree to those. The format of the proposal, how they want you to respond back to them, the qualification experiences of what they're looking for, the cost of breakdown, and then an evaluation criteria. Almost all solid RFPs, they tell you exactly how they're going to make a choice, typically in a matrix format, so that you can go in there and respond to them in a way that that everybody's uniform. And this will allow companies to sometimes evaluate themselves before they submit a proposal. You have, if you get enough individuals who could help you with that, then you are able to quickly kind of see where you would normally fall at. I have a quote. I usually start off my coursework with quotes. It's supposed to be easy. Excuse me, if it's supposed to be hard, it is supposed to be hard. Let me make sure I say those right. If it were easy, everyone would do it. That's one of my favorite from Tom Hanks from A League of Their Own. Sorry for fumbling that, but the primary objective, basically, it's not going to be easy sometimes, and that's to be expected. So when you step in there, it does become easier over time as you get better with that, and you do one proposal and you read one proposal, then you'll find that over time you get to be more of an expert for it. And this is a sample RFP that I'm gonna call in just a minute. And then I always introduce another good quote is you're the one that I wanted to find. So it's a very important when you're monitoring RFPs that you find the exact, the one that fits right within your wheelhouse, the one that really meets your company's expectations of what you're looking for, and that's something that you can provide services for. So pinpointing that opportunity is very important. So when you go through those, sort of a helpful approach as we go into one of these RFPs, it's always important that you read the entire proposal at first, and then pay attention to the areas that we have talked about here. Then you set it aside, and then maybe talk to your colleagues. Make sure you fit the request, and then complete the proposal and submit it. And when you submit those, submit it closer to the time when it's due, and then hopefully you'll be one of the ones selected to move forward. Generally, the first step is always making sure that you're able to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So it's very important when you respond to an RFP that you're doing exactly what they ask in the format that they're asking you to provide the information back to them. So do not be creative at the first step. The time to be creative and to get creative is really at the second step. So, and another part of this is, work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So, when you get that RFP, what I traditionally encourage you to do, go ahead and get it completed. And you may just set it aside for a while, but then get it off your plate, but hold it before you submit it until it's closer to the due date. You really don't want it laying out there, but it's not something you need to work on over and over again. You sort of wait and see, and then you'll learn over time what's better. And as always, by Einstein, the only source of knowledge is experience. So let's step into some actual RFPs here at Gov Directions. And I usually go into an industry. Let me just see what some of the notes are here. One, public relations, public affairs firm. Okay, and you got a women-owned certification. I'll talk a little bit about certifications as we go along here. But when you first come in, a lot of us come with experience and potentially in the private sector. We've got some private contracts already in place, and we're expanding into the government sector. Others we may be entrepreneurial in nature, and we have worked with a firm, but we haven't had our own individual contracts. And so we are entering into the government space as a new contractor, but with the experience. And then the third is just completely brand new, and you have no experience in the areas that you have. I would say that the level of ability to win a contract sort of steps along that same path. The more experience you have, the better chance you have. So that highlighting that experience is very important, but also to say that if you are brand new, you still do have a chance with government contracting. I would focus in on some of the smaller size projects to start off with and then build up. It's very difficult to start right at the federal level with a contract. Those are nice to get and nice to pursue, but you really do want to start with the state and local government at first. So when you come in, it's very important in our system that you're tracking correctly. And I would just highlight, just very quickly, sort of a demonstration that we do on our general demonstration. But we have the federal government out there. We have all the state agencies and thousands, close to 100,000 local governments. These are oftentimes governments that are even formed by other governments, hospital district, airport systems, park systems, all with the ability to procure. Some 5,000 calls for bids and proposals every single day, posted at GovDirections. And so I use a puzzle to go illustrate that fact. And it's fragmented, but it's not broken. In the sense you pick up a puzzle box, thousands of pieces sometimes, and then you start assembling it, and it produces a nice image. And that's what GovDirections does for our members every day. As each bid comes in, we show them one by one as they're added, sort of a proof of work concept. And we're seeing them coming in British Columbia, North Carolina, Mississippi, Iowa, some 34,000 active today. And that continues to grow, and some are awarded out. And then tomorrow it'll start over. So constant churn of information. So it's important to continue to monitor that. And of course, we have to assemble that information in classification methods. And so what we do at GovDirections is we don't expect you to learn all that governmentese, and we crosswalk every single bid and RFP directly to individual categories. And so if I was looking for our RFP in my industry that I traditionally consult with, in human resource and staffing, classification, compensation systems, I might start there. Now, my daily alert's going to drive that information to my email box, and it's going to be built around me based on those individual settings that I've set for my account. But here we have, let's just kind of maybe pull some of these out. I saw one earlier in Florida that looked a little bit interesting, St. Cloud, Florida. I wasn't want to pursue that one though. And so I'm looking through, and I want to make sure sometimes, Florida is a little difficult to come to do business with unless you have an office there. So you kind of learn some of these restrictions that you might want to be aware of as you're going into bidding. You kind of learn that over time when you go and you actually submit some proposals, and you kind of pick up on parts of that. So it's important that you learn from those. And so here's one in Oregon, for example. Oregon's a great area to do business in, easy to win contracts. It's a classification project. I might want to save this one because I know that in my personal folders, one I'm going to really pursue. Also Florence. I might want to see where that's at. We're going in, I think we'll see Florence, Oregon. It looks like it's near some water. That's good. Let's see, let's back it up. And they're right on the coast. So that would actually be a great project for, I like to do, when I do business with governments, I like to go into places where I can work, that I can also enjoy being there. So that's a great place to see and be. So I'd go back to that, something I might want to pursue. Leave GovDirections at this point. They're at the individual government. So here's Florence, Oregon, some smaller to medium-sized business or government. That's also, I traditionally stay with cities, and I work with cities that are between about 10,000 and 30,000 population. This is going to fall in that wheelhouse for me. So I'm sort of pinpointing my opportunity, definitely something I might be interested in. I'm going to read through some of the basics here. Looks like I'm going to be eligible to pursue it. They have their document online, and then I'll go in and take a look at that document. So here we are, a couple clicks, I'm at the actual request, and you'll see right away I've got sometimes I'll have a cover page, but here they've got the table of contents for me, solicitation requirements, scope of work, the basics that we just talked about, how they're going to evaluate, how this could select, and the contract requirements. And they actually have a sample contract already. So I'm going to be able to get the information I'm going to need in order to decide how I want to work this project today. In addition, what I've already done is, for our company over the 20 plus years that I've been doing this kind of consulting work, is built my portfolio. I have built my solicitation document that I'm going to respond back to them. And a lot of times I'm just slotting that information into the RFP whenever I submit the response. I'm going to keep that updated. A lot of times we will have a our capability statement first, and I might maybe slap that in as a cover. It's going to give a one-page summary of all about me, and that's going to help me stand out. And that's almost required with federal government contracts, but with state and local, it really does make me stand out above competition when I have that one pager that they can agent, a procurement agent can see exactly what NIGB commodity codes I have or I meet. If I'm a woman-owned business or a minority-owned business, I'm going to tell them that in that document. As I step into this, and you'll notice the RFPs are going to be a little bit longer. The invitations to bid typically just maybe a 1 or 2 page quote sheet. A lot of times though with 20 other pages that might be filled with all kind of rules and regulations that you have to follow. But a typical request for proposal though is more a document that's more spelled out in terms of writing style. It's more paragraph format and a document and in a almost like a publication and for the response. And so that's important. So here I'm on average about 18 pages, and this one though includes a contract. So the contracts will probably be about the significant portion of that of this RFP. I haven't actually looked at this one yet, but here they're going to give me some basic information about where they're at, and then the first cover letter they're going to and basically the first part of they're going to tell me really what they want, and they're going to give me a description and the solicitation and the date that they want me to respond by, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, February 12th, which the first thing I want you to learn is that if you get it there at 2:01, you're too late. You wasted all your time. So make sure you follow the instructions and you get it there in a timely fashion. What I always try to do is get it there about a day ahead of time. And I have to look at the timings. If this was a Monday, though, I want to make sure they have it on a Friday. But make sure it's there a full day ahead of time. A lot of documents now can be submitted online and sealed online, so I wouldn't submit it to that morning if that's the case. I don't want my RFP just laying out there for folks to take a look at it beforehand. It just, I don't want to encourage that. So I do tend to wait until the last minute to send my information in. In addition, they may have a final addendum that they may issue the day or two before, and I want to make sure I'm aware of that before I submit anything, because that's typically a binding proposal, and I've got to be certain that I can fulfill those obligations. And now they're going to tell me some basics like contracting rule 817. I'm going to want to look that up, and you can just do it with a typical Google search. Or you could go into the actual city. If they put that on there, they're going to have that spelled out somewhere there on their page. Now they've given me a contact person. When they give me a contact person, I'm only going to deal with that individual. And so you don't need to be calling the mayor or the city manager or any other person or individual with that organization. You're going to make sure you speak to the person that they tell you to. That's very important. You almost entered into a cone of silence between you and that organization when they issue the RFP or they issue the invitation to bid. So you got to be, whenever you do have a question or you need clarification, you need to follow precisely to the word their rules and regs that they have, and the way they want you to deal with them. And just some simple thing. They are going to let you email this here. It seems to be ever since COVID, it's more and more you see this. But they say to do this as your subject line, make sure you do that. Okay, it's really small points sometimes can get you disqualified, and you don't want that to happen. Okay, it also shows your ability to follow instructions and in the process, and it really helps you stand out when you do everything exactly as they request you to. Okay, and so they've given me some basic information. Then as you step into it, they're going to get, the first part is introduction. They're going to tell me just about everything I should need to know about this particular project. It's for 75 employees. It's almost perfect for a company for the types of projects I typically work on. And they're going to give you some funding mechanisms. I might be able to go back and actually look in the minutes of the recent meetings, and sometimes they'll have a budget listed of what they expect to pay for the project. And that's important because that can really set you apart. Because first of all, if it's too low, that you can't provide that service, and there's no reason for you to waste your time. It's going to cost me, $4,000 or $5,000 for travel-related expenses to get there if I need to be on site. So I want to make sure I can afford to do the project. Okay, things like that. So you can do that. If you don't see that in their agenda, because basically what happens in the agendas, probably maybe a month before they issue the RFP, they probably have talked about it and got the permission from the city council. And it's good to have that background information. So I want to go in there and do that research. In addition, you may want to go in and take a look at the budget for that fiscal year. And just because last year was COVID year, a lot of the projects were sort of held. So you may want to, if you don't see it in the current fiscal year budget, you may want to look at the last year, because they've got particular situations where city managers, county managers are able to dip back into funds from the previous year for this year's project, and they're just in reserve. But they'll tell you traditionally how much they're planning on spending on a project like this. It's very rare that it's not there. And GovDirections does performance-based research, is what we refer to there. Is and basically, so if you have any questions about budgeting for a project, we can certainly do that background research on you. But they're going to give you these details. A lot of things that you will want to, I might go through here. I'm going to highlight those. And whenever they give me an understanding of the project, whenever I write my proposal back to them, as I introduce my company, I'm going to talk to them about, the number of projects that I've worked with around this total number of employees. So that's something important to them. So I would say, I've done 10 projects where the employment base was between, say, 60 and 100 people. And that's where I do my best work. So I'm going to try to draw in the information that they've given to me in the introduction about their company, about their organization, as in my proposal back to them. Okay. In addition, a lot of this is used for telling me how I need to price my services back to them. And a lot of these will be indicators in performance research for me to respond to them. For example, in my business, they're looking for 55 classifications. That kind of tells me that I want to budget probably about $400 per classification, and that's going to be my price. And I'm going to know the going market. Traditionally, if it's maybe 20% on the upside, 20% on the downside of whatever that price point is, and try to stay within that. If I can't stay within that, I really don't need to be bidding on this project. But on this type of a project, this size, a little bit smaller, and where the location is at, they probably won't get as many responses. So I might go on a high side for my pricing point. If I was brand new, and I didn't really have the expertise that I have now on 20 plus years experience, I might go on the low side of that. So take that common denominator for pricing, and then reduce that down about 20% in order to really go in there and win that business. And that will drive that, especially if I got the qualifications and then I have a little bit lower rate, I'm going to be a top contender for this type of project. They're also going to give me the issue and office and the submittal location. They're going to tell me exactly how to do this. And that's important. Okay. And so when you come in there and follow that. So if I have contact questions, I'm going to send those to Alex Ferguson. And I probably would not email. I probably would just call, since they provided the phone number. It is a way to get this is an HR manager too. It's probably somewhat rare they're actually talking with the one who's the decision maker. And I would think this person is actually the decision maker in this project. Traditionally, you're going to be sent to a procurement officer or somebody on a procurement staff for questions. And then they would take your question and then pose it to the decision makers, and then get that back into a format for everyone to see. Okay. And they're probably going to release a one pager of all questions asked. They'll give me a solicitation schedule. I need to make sure I can meet that schedule. That's a tight time frame. They want to basically, as soon as you respond, within 2 weeks, they're going to tell you if you won. Okay. So they're going to evaluate the proposals. They're going to have interviews. So if I haven't heard from them by, say, February 20th, I'm going to kind of realize that I wasn't chosen. Okay. It's very rare that they would tell you you were not the chosen one. They'll wait until it's actually adopted and the contract is signed and sealed and delivered before they're going to tell anyone who they've chosen. And that's sort of the process. But if they told you right away in here when they're going to give you the timeframes, and you sort of know if you weren't called, then you're not going to be in that process. And you might want to, if they're going to award the contract in February, then I might want to watch the agenda items. Especially if I was one of the ones interviewed, they may not even tell me that I'm the selected one until they actually get the approval from their city council. And so I might want to watch that February and probably March, the very first week in March, the agendas to see who won the project and at what price. Once all that information is published at this point, but they give you those dates there. That's very helpful. Sometimes it's probably a little rare they give you this much specificity and when they're actually going to choose someone. So that's probably pretty good. If there's any particular legal issues that they want to talk about here, they want to talk about trade secrets and public records law, basically just saying that your proposal is going to be out there. So be aware of that. And they'll tell you what the rules are, whether or not, if I was, because I might go in there and take a look at my competition, see what they're submitting. And so sometimes that can be restricted in how they do that. And they'll tell you that and those types of provisions. And also cancellations. So when you submit your proposal, you got to be able to, of course, meet those expectations if they award you the contract. And so if they also on the other side, if they do cancel, they're going to always give themselves that out so they can cancel it. But that needs to be clear going into it. And they always spell that out in government. So, but the government's almost always reserve their ability to come in and cancel, especially in the time of COVID. But it's very rare. Once you submit a proposal, it's accepted, then you're going through with that project. Sometimes I call them gold certificates. They're good as gold. So that's very important. And probably one of the number one question I get is how am I going to get paid? A lot of times I'll tell you that specifically in a document, but traditionally, if you've got a contract and you did need to help fund it, then if you walk into your banker with that contract, they're going to be able to pre-fund that for you. But here, they're clearly stating here with cost of RFP that they're not going to pay any expenses until you're awarded it, and then that's when you become a client, or they become a client of yours, and then there would be a payment made of some sort, probably built around your individual response back to them. And any kind of clarifications that they are necessary, additional research, revisions, they're going to spell that out. Governments have to spell out things to you, so that's important. And that's why you see a lot of times really lengthy documents, but most of it's what you normally would expect in any sort of relationship, business relationship. If you need to modify or withdraw, I traditionally will put a 90-day collar on any kind of proposal that I send out and say, my price is good up to this point. Okay, you don't want it out there open-ended. Cost could change. We did see that during COVID. A lot of things became more expensive. Some things became less expensive in how we approach things. And so you can make some adjustments. And so you want to give that time period there and all your responses back. Oftentimes in RFPs, you actually won't even, in a request for proposal, you won't even submit a dollar amount. You just submit your qualification. How are you going to go about doing it? And they invite you in to talk about your project and your proposal or your methodology. And at that point, they negotiate on your fees. And so they'll spell that out. Now, an invitation to bid is always there with the price points. And the agreement is a whole, these are traditional language for any kind of document. They'll show you the scope of work. And this is where you really get into how you're going to start writing your proposal. What I always traditionally do in the scope is I'll come in and take what they're asking me to do each step, and that's going to how I'm going to respond back to them when I write it. So, and whenever I say I'm going to do this and this and this, I'm going to start off with I'm going to review current job descriptions for this purpose. Then I'm going to propose where appropriate. This is how I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to recommend additions. So I speak exactly their language back to them in my proposal, so that way I know that I'm meeting their expectations. And I might even have this document and use it and you draw a little line next to it for the check mark and say, yes, I did this. Yes, I've done this. Or no, I can't do this. For example, maybe I'm not an FLSA expert. I can't do this, but I'll figure out a way to get it done. Here's a sub that I'm going to use to make this happen. Okay, so you speak to it even if you can't do something. That's very important. Don't just leave it blank. Don't skip it over. If they've asked for it, make sure you're speaking to that. And so each of those will be spelled out for you and be common to your industry, and you should be able to understand that. And they actually speak to independent contractors here. It's probably a pretty common occurrence where I come together and with someone else in order to meet their expectations, bringing in a couple other individuals who have different skill sets. And in fact, if this is a larger project and I'm somewhat new, if there is a pre-proposal meeting, a pre-proposal session, and I'm not sure if this one actually had that. Let me get back up to that schedule. They do not have a pre-proposal in this one, but if they did, then I might attend that and as a subcontractor and say, this is who I am, this is what I do, and I would be glad to be a sub on this project if someone's looking for a sub. Okay, and that's a way to get yourself in the door, especially with larger projects and larger companies. And just let them go around, because they typically go around even on Zoom, allow everybody to introduce themselves, and that's a way to make people aware of that. Okay, and so nowadays they're going to speak to you about remote work, some of the newer provisions that we're seeing in details, but they never leave anything to judgment. You know, they're going to be very specific about topics. Okay, as we go in, delivery schedule, how they want you to deliver, and oftentimes this will actually speak to the project in certain steps along the way, and you may actually be proposing that back in your methodology. Oftentimes I'll say, you know, I'm going to do 1/3 of the work within 30 days, 2/3 of the work within 90 days, and then complete within 180 days. And I'm going to build my payment structure around that if they haven't told me how they're going to pay me. So in my proposal, I'll say I want, you know, 1/3 up front, 2/3 by this date, and then the final payment at delivery. And that's traditionally negotiated between you and the government agency. Just to remember, governments do pay, and they pay. You know, there's a common belief that they don't pay quickly, but they do. And so that's important to understand that, you know, work with them the best you can, you will get paid. That's something that's important. Okay. Yeah, project schedule and plan timeline, they'll list that out. They're going to tell you how they want the proposal submitted. Okay. They're very specific here. They want an 8.5 by 11, margins at least a 1/2 inch. Okay, don't go in there with a proposal that's, you know, a lot of us got to be creative, and you know, you got 1 inch sides. Okay, just don't do it. You're going to get disqualified. They're going to throw you out. If they are that precise with something, then you want to make sure you meet that. Maximum number of pages cannot exceed 10 pages. Okay, don't send them 12. Okay, and you know what? I wouldn't send them 7. I'd send them 10. You try to get up there with, you know, make your proposal look good. But clarity of purpose, clarity of response is very important. Okay, don't give them a lot of extra stuff they don't need. Okay, but follow the instructions. Let's see. They also said, especially with technology, yeah, they want it must be less than 20 megabytes. That's very specific. Okay, so don't go in there with a, you know, sometimes people think they can attach a book and it says something that they want to refer back to it, then they can be disqualified because they gave them 30 megabytes instead. They want to know the key personnel, have your personnel ready to go and their qualifications. This is once again where a capability statement comes in handy, that you kind of have that all ready to go. And just remember, what you use here, you're going to use it for some time to come. Okay, so it's and you're going to modify it. So if I'm dealing with, you know, agencies in Oregon, then I'm going to speak to my qualifications in Oregon. I'm going to speak to companies that governments that I've worked with in Oregon. And if I'm just new to the sector, then I'm going to speak to the private companies I've worked in that area. And if there's nothing in Oregon, then I'm going to expand out to Washington, California, and then Idaho. Okay, maybe the border states of Nevada. And so I'm going to keep that sort of localized in my response when I'm speaking back to them. And you'll have much more success with that. When they tell you the evaluation and selection, this is the most important part. They're going to tell you how they want to make the decision. So don't give them reasons not to hire you. You know, have someone evaluate your proposal before you submit it. Get a couple people to do it, and with the way they respond to you, using the evaluation criteria from the RFP, you're most likely going to get the exact same responses back from the government that way. Okay? And then you can learn from that. In addition, afterwards, the evaluation criteria will be published somewhere. Go back and look and see where you failed. Okay, learn from your mistakes. It's very important that you do that. Okay? In the evaluation criteria, they're going to they want an introductory letter. They want a project understanding, the qualifications and experience, the project schedule, and the cost. So the cost is a part of this, and then the references. Traditionally, they'll tell you what the percentage breakdown is. Okay, and I'll look and see if they do here in just a second. But it doesn't look like, it looks like they're just giving you the 6 parts of what they're going to evaluate you on, as opposed to the scoring method that they're going to use. Okay, so sometimes, you know, you'll see that 50% is cost or 20% cost, and then, you know, references are more important, or your ability to do it quick is more important. So they'll tell you where that weight is at. The interviews are always important. Be ready to go and do those. And when you get to the interview stage, that's when you get to be creative. Okay, and you're able to really shine. And so practice that pitch. Get those individuals that can be the most critical of you, and let them tell you where you might need some help at. And before you go in and actually do an interview, that'll help you in a process of doing interviews and pitching. Pitching is very important in government contracting. They really want to know that you know what you're talking about. Okay, and then in negotiations, be prepared to negotiate. And if you can't really move off a price, don't. They want you to be able to fulfill the work that you've agreed to. Okay, that's always more important than to skim off $2,000 or $3,000. But and most business owners will recognize this. A bird in hand is more important. So win that contract. Okay, sometimes it's better to cut your fee a little bit in order to have business. And then in most businesses, opportunities will grow to more businesses. So that's important. And then, the contract, they're going to give you the award and insurance requirements. Insurance requirements are very common that you would typically see across any sector. Sometimes, they'll come in and they'll may have a little bit higher than what you're used to. Here, you might want to get a letter from your insurer says you can be covered up to this level if you win the contract. Okay, and then you purchase that when you win the contract. Okay, so if you have it already, that's good. But if you don't have it, just go out there and be assertive in having it ready to go. But you don't really want to spend money that you don't have to. Okay, and then that typically suffices that, as long as you're aware of that and you're able to meet that. And I've seen that happen over and over again. And then executing the contract, they're giving you a sample contract. I'm going to read through this, make sure that my company can agree to it. Governments are not that difficult to work with contracting requirements. It's almost always driven by state law. And so it's pretty common across organizations. And your statement of work traditionally is what you have negotiated at the very end. And even here, this is the public contracting requirements. You want to make sure that you don't violate any of these, though, okay? This is a really important, the ethics of government contracting, because you can find yourself in trouble. You do not want that to happen, okay? Don't call the wrong person by mistake. These are just minor, sometimes very minor problems, but they create very big problems for you. And so that's a sample RFP. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. There really aren't. Once you read one, I think you've read most of them in your business. And every state's slightly different, but they're all trained by the same organizations on how to write these proposals. Sometimes you'll see them cut and pasted over and over again, and they've forgotten to change the name or something when they issue the RFP actually. So you'll come to see the same types of pieces of information over and over again. And so I want to make that aware. So are there any questions today? I do appreciate your time. And I'm going to stop the recording at this point.